Jargonites are attacking Joe Rogan right now. Joe Rogan is in a situation of deep defense. He's cuddled up and trying to protect himself from something quite strange, which is these magic spells by these strange people. These people who are throwing words at him. And these words, they seem like nothing, misinformation. It's just a word. Sticks and stones might break my bones. What can a word do to someone? But of course, these words carry incredible magic power. They're magic jargon words. They're magic abstractions that someone can wield like a hammer and smash down upon someone. They're things like a magic wand that you can point at someone and bad things will happen. It's like that whole story where you have a herd of zebras, and if you paint one of them with a red mark, immediately the lions will kill the zebras, because once you're able to identify them, the lions will come out of the bushes and strike. And this is sort of what's happening with Joe. He's been painted with a red mark. He's been called a misinformer. A magic piece of jargon has been painted upon him, and now you have all these forces in society coming down to strike him, to try banish him from formal society. You see the White House even coming up and saying this stuff. Now that's a pretty big deal, you know, the goddamn President of the United States coming out and making statements about Joe Rogan and painting pictures upon him, labeling him in certain ways. These are very, very strong statements. Now, I have been sitting here for years saying that the most important thing that we can become savvy about is the words, is the jargon. We must become good at seeing this jargon, because of course, if you're getting, this is magic that's happening. If you're getting people painting pictures upon you, using language in order to manipulate people's emotions, to send bad energy towards you and have bad things happen to you, of course, the only way you can counteract that is becoming savvy to how it works. You must understand how magic works. You must understand how this stuff works. And of course, the true way that this works, it's very simple. It's very rational and easy to break down. It's about using language and categories and jargon to get people to focus on things with pre-decided emotions. If I can call Joe Rogan someone who's spreading misinformation, immediately inside of you, because like me and you are good people, we're all good people. When you hear someone's misinforming someone, you say like, what a prick, what a dickhead, what a nasty person. Asher, why would you misinform people? That's not nice. It's basically lying. And so all this energy would build up inside of you that's negative, and you'd project that negative energy towards the person. And so this is why these categories, these pieces of jargon are so powerful. It's because if you can paint one of these upon someone successfully, you imprison them, you've trapped them, you've put them in a jiu-jitsu hold. And it's very hard to get out of this, because if someone says you're a misinformer and you try to say, I'm not a misinformer, it's like, you're misinforming me. I shouldn't have to listen to you. Shut him up. And this is what's happening with Joe. And I want to talk today about how to break Joe out of this, and how you can become savvy to this so that you become anti-fragile to this, and you're able to spot this and point it out. Because what's so interesting about magic is it's like the Wizard of Oz. It's like the Wizard of Oz where, for example, if you just simply see what's happening, it loses its power. Magic is subtle, but if you can understand it, you can understand how people castigate people with words, you break free from it. And of course, the simplest way to do it is just look at the fucking words. This is all that people don't do. They don't pay attention specifically to the actual language games that happen right in front of their nose. So Voldemort's there casting a spell, and you have to be like Harry Potter, understanding how it works. It's just like, learn, look right in front of you, what's happening. So Joe Rogan's being called, it's being said that he's misinforming people. Unpack that for me. What does that mean? Now, there's not a lot of very interesting ideas that come from this, because don't we live in a society on this premise of democracy, where we all together come as a group and gather all the information we can, and it's our responsibility as divine individuals. We believe in the responsibility of the individual and the intelligence of the individual and the instincts of the individual, that if we can all go out there and forage information, we as a group will come to the right decisions. And the right decisions will be the right thing to lead us forward. And of course, the sort of free marketplace of ideas is the key to this. We should let all the information be available so that people can sift through it, and people will come to sensible decisions, because people are ultimately rational at root. This is the whole premise of the Enlightenment, isn't it? And that makes sense. It's like a cybernetic entity. It's like a marketplace. And all the information gets dumped in, and we, the individuals, are the processing unit that come out with the right decision as a consequence. It's a very, very interesting idea. Now, this is the premise of society. And I've had people, when I challenge this idea, when I say maybe that doesn't work the way you think it does, people come back at me and they throw magic jargon at me. Oh, you're an idiot. You're a fool. You're evil. You're wrong. You're morally wrong. You hate democracy. What's wrong? And I'm like, oh, Jesus, there's just no winning with this game. Because what this whole idea of misinformation does is it completely violates that entire principle. Because the idea of misinformation means that there's information that's bad. There's bad information. There's wrong information. And if you let this information seep into the marketplace of ideas, the ignorant, dumb plebs will get entranced and start believing the wrong crap, wrong information. And so what you have to do is you have to guard them. You have to become a sort of supplier of information, a dealer of information. You have to become a censor. This is actually where the word came from originally in Rome. You have to become someone who filters the information to make sure that they get the right information so they can make the right decisions. And this is where the problem comes, because obviously you're afraid that if you just let the free information flow in, the peasants are idiots, and you'll have people like Joe Rogan show up like a chimp and be like, let's all be chimps, and then everybody will, go chimp mode, and then society will fall apart because there'll be a mass schizophrenic hallucination or something like this. So instead, what you have to do is very tightly control this information to only allow the right information in, so that people can then, within the confines of this cybernetic brain, make the right decisions. They sift through the right information which leads them to the right decision. Well, that starts to get very interesting for me, because that's not what I thought this was supposed to be about. And maybe you would say something like, well, we have to understand that not all information is true. We need to give people the facts. We need to give people the truth. But of course, the question always comes back to, who decides what information is true? This is a very big responsibility. And this is where the rationalizations of the jargonites get absolutely fantastic. It's a big responsibility to decide what's misinformation and what's not misinformation, what's misleading and what's not misleading. It's hard, because if you just don't do anything, you'll have the lowest common denominator, because the plebs are idiots, as we always, for some reason, suggest. Even though we're trying to get them to make all decisions, the plebs are idiots. All right, well, look, I didn't make the rules. So because the plebs are idiots, if you just leave a free market of ideas, people like Joe Rogan, grugs, chimp men like Joe Rogan will end up gaining the most attention. And they'll end up possessing an awful lot of people's ideas, which is kind of what's happened. Joe Rogan's now the most popular media place. It's nothing to do with who he is, or he's nothing to do with the fact that he innately speaks to the intelligence within people. None of that stuff. It's because the people are fucking retards. And he is completely able to woo them into idiocy. He speaks to their lowest nature. And so we Brahmins, we priestly types, we have to sit down among ourselves and step up and take the ultimate responsibility. We have to stand up and we have to say to ourselves, alright, I've got to censor, that's a bit of jargon I got to censor it. These plunkers, these dorks, these foolish peasants, if someone doesn't guard them from the Jogans, the Joe Rogans, if someone doesn't guard them from it's like I'm tripping or something like that, I'm just blending all my words together. If someone doesn't guard them from Joe Rogan, they will get taken. It'll be like a wolf getting them. So what we must do is stand up and become the guardians. We must become the enlightened Brahmins who protect the plebs. We are the sacred ones who stand on the outside of the herd, in the shadows, sort of saying that we are one of the herds, but representing them, guiding the herds, leading the herds. We're the leaders of the herds. We're the shepherd of the herd. And we will decide what jargon is allowed in. And we will control their categories and control their concepts. And we are the sacred ones. And of course, we have to give ourselves a good name. And so we'll call ourselves things that validate who we are. We'll come up with a piece of jargon that magically, like a magic spell, validates us. And we'll call ourselves stuff like the scientists, the experts. Now, of course, people will hear this stuff and be like, oh, well, this is why it's such a powerful spell, because it's like, well, if you go against the jargonites, you're going against experts, you're going against science. Now, this is not correct at all, because, in fact, jargon is a mental construct. It is a political category, a psychological category. And so if you say something like expert or science or scientist or misinformation or misleading, or false speech, whatever it is, all of these things are mental tools that these Brahmins use to control reality. Because you could have what you might define in a right hemispheric way. You might look at someone who's spent 10,000 hours studying in a laboratory doing specific things with very specific biological processes, And for all intents and purposes, we could grab that entire life experience that they have and try to compress it down into this single mouth noise, this single abstraction that we call an expert on the topic of biology. We could say that maybe, if you wanted to. And this is maybe a genuine person with real experience, not some fucking journalist who says that they're one of these. And this person, because they're not saying the right things that the Brahmins want, this person gets pushed aside. This person gets accused of misleading and misinformation, whereas the actual jargon, the actual concept of expert is taken from them. And then the journalists who represent this turn on him and put him down. And what you start to see forming is a power structure, a psychological power structure. This might be the genius that I have figured out, that all archetypes come down to the mountain archetype. I'm just stealing this off Jordan Peterson. Like, I love how I'm pretending I came up with that. I can't make anything. I'm supposed to be like an artist, and I'm here like talking about political, cultural commentary again. Like, I'm just so jaded. Like, anybody who's been angry at me so far for this video, here it is. I'm just gonna have a breakdown now. Like, screw this, me talking about experts. It's like, I just wish I was an expert in something other than like ranting about cope and book cope and jargon on the internet. Anyway, back to what I was saying. This hierarchy of power is like a natural way that society tends to go. So what you see forming at the moment is the same old patterns that were there thousands of years ago. Back in India, we had the Shudra at the bottom, the untouchables, the undercaste, and you had then the peasant caste, in essence, who were the working castes, the craftsmen, the artists, the salesmen. And then above them, you had the warriors and the kings. But beyond the warriors and the kings was something very, very special. And this was the Brahmin caste. These were the masters of categories, the masters of concepts. These were the brains over the bronze. Because you would think that it's the kings, it's the big, nasty, mean men of the society that rule everything. They're the decision makers. They're the ones that make it all work. That's what you'd think, because you're a fucking idiot pleb and you don't know any better. But of course, I'm a Brahmin you should listen to. I'm an expert you should listen to. So I'm going to teach you. Those big brawny kings, you think they're the chads who make all the decisions, but that's not the truth at all, because it's very, very fascinating. You can only really think within the confines of a perspective, and a perspective is built up out of categories. Categories control perspectives. Jargon controls perspectives. This is actually the purpose of it. The purpose of jargon is to make you focus on something and to reduce reality down to simple concepts. And so a Brahmin, a priestly type, an expert, stands atop the mountain, the pyramid of society, and controls the categories. It's almost like he's giving aim to the warriors to shoot towards. The kings make decisions based on the categories that the magic Wizard of Oz Brahmins dangle in front of them. And so the Brahmins are masters of language, masters of concepts, masters of categories, masters of the mind. They're the nervous system of a society. And they wire themselves down in a very subtle way. They tend to be strange people. They're not big chads and big kings. They're more like decrepit, priestly types, golems that are thinking, because the thinking man always wins in the end because he thinks long term, whereas the brawny chad man is usually pretty cool, but doesn't really think this way. He doesn't think thousands of years in advance. He doesn't think about the superordinate concepts. He doesn't think about things like morality and all this stuff. And so the Brahmin controls concepts, and therefore he herds the society below him extremely well. And this is like an archetype that you see forming, a power structure. You have this interaction between the strong and masculine warrior caste, the priestly types, the Brahmins, the category controllers, and then the plebs underneath, the workers, the gut bacteria of society that produce stuff. The fighters, the producers, the thinkers. And this interaction is always what you see going on. And in medieval Christianity is the exact same process. Exact same process. You have the kings, the Christian Germanic kings that ruled all of Europe with a European-wide order. And they were the big brawny knights that went around and fought each other the whole time. And they made lots of decisions and lots of crazy stuff. And then you had a counterforce beside them, the priests, the Catholic priests, centered in Rome, wired out of Rome like a nervous system, bringing it all back to this central command post. And this Catholic church sat as a Brahmin caste over everybody else. And beneath them were the peasants. The peasants were the people who tilled the land. The serfs were the people who tilled the land and gave their tithe to the priest and gave their energy to the kings. The priests were almost like almost like a brain was putting these little neurons inside every single town. There was a priest who was collecting energy and then giving out information in return, controlling the categories in return. And they were mediators between the lords and the peasants, and the lords would sometimes do that between the peasants and the priests. And you had a rock, paper, scissors situation. And this stuff always shows up. It's an archetype. It's always there. And what you see happening nowadays is the same phenomenon. Even though we bullshit ourselves with these concepts of equality, we have the preachers of equality standing up there representing this stuff, suggesting to us that there is no, that we are all equal and we're all making these equal decisions, yet they insist that we begin to re-establish this conceptual power, these conceptual systems. We think, for example, that the politicians run the show, and they're more like the kings of the old. Maybe they make certain decisions, but they don't control categories. They don't control broader concepts. They don't control words, and they don't control the power of words. And that is the realm of the priestly type. And the priestly type have incredible power, because the king can do quite a lot, an awful lot of authority, but the priest can do something far more interesting. The priest can rile up hatred in people. The priest is able to use categories to get you burnt at the stake. And the king can do that because he is the master of violence, but the priest can do it in a different way. Because through the power of a category, he can point at you. He can take a category and place it upon you, and out of the population, out of the peasantry that he has brainwashed, he can evoke the strong, monstrous, mimetic forces, the scapegoating forces. There is the evil one. There is the sinner. There is the hateful Satanist, the pagan, the dark one. He is the cause of danger in this village of ours. So let's rip his skin from his body and burn him alive. And this is the power that the priests possess, and they know this. The priestly types, the people geared towards language, they deep down in their instincts, they know this. And when they get into that position where they have power, as Nietzsche said, there's no greater haters than priests. There's no people with a deeper thirst to power than these weird incels that go up to the top of society, don't get the sexual pleasures that the healthy, strong kings do. So they sort of recede into themselves and become these neurotic incels, and they can only thirst. They go castrati mode. They go celibate for life, and they can only thirst for incredible levels of power, true mental domination, true reforging of the world in the image of their own mind. And then if you stand outside that vision, fury falls upon you. They strike you down with lightning. They rip your skin from your body, and they hurt you and destroy you. And of course, we don't live in quite a medieval society anymore, but the same phenomenon are appearing at the moment. The same energies are erupting out of the bottom. You've got the same hierarchy and dynamic in play. You've got these Brahmin castes, these priestly types, for whatever reason they found themselves in these positions. Perhaps you call it the media or something like this, or journalists, or maybe there's more to it. And what's happening is they are trying to grip upon language. They are trying to decide what reality is, because this is the true war. The priest decides what reality is, because he decides what categories are real. And you have someone like Joe Rogan stumbling along, because Joe Rogan's a bit more like the old king, the old warrior, a bit of a grug, knuckle dragging on the floor, kind of chimping around, doesn't quite know what he's getting into, just trying to be an honest guy. And you listen to Joe Rogan, you're like, this guy ain't some Machiavellian overlord, He's sitting down there and he's just asking questions. He's just going around and open-mindedly exploring things. And what happens is he evokes the vitriol of the priests. He tripwires the wrong thing. And all of a sudden he learns pretty fast that there's freedom within the confines of the categorical playpen that the priestly types have put together. There's certain jargon that is sacred. Even though we live in an atheistic age, a non-religious age, religion is here as strong as it ever was. Nietzsche said this too. The religion has died, but the religious instinct is rising and on the ascendancy. And the people are getting coddled by these priestly types, because these priestly types have a way of seeing things that they demand is superordinate. Now, all of this leads to the great big red pill, the biggest red pill of all. And this is the postmodern red pill. I know Jordan Peterson has taught you not to believe in postmodernism. You're supposed to turn around and say postmodernism is bogus. It's some type of project orchestrated by postmodern bloody neo-Marxists or something like this, trying to mislead you. Bad Brahmins. And fair enough, I see what he's trying to do. He's trying to delegitimize the current Brahmin caste because he doesn't like their bullshit and cope. And it's fair enough. An awful lot of their stuff is a bit suspicious. You see how they try to master and manipulate language. What was his whole thing about? This really quick change of language that he saw in front of his eyes. He saw all these concepts and categories get remanipulated to mean things that he thought were silly. And he was like, I don't have to participate in your language. Think about these language games that were being imposed upon him and the stance he took. He was saying that language cannot be weaponized against me. I stand for free speech, or should I say, authority to not be mind-fucked by a Brahmin. Now, the true red pill about society, the very, very difficult one, this is the very Nietzschean idea, is that it's very, very, very hard to come to something which we call a true truth, specifically a consensus-based truth. So what do we mean by that? It's very hard to get the herd to see what is real, and also to understand how that reality, what that reality is. Because the whole premise of civilization, the whole premise of being in a herd, is that you're escaping reality. Nature, the world out there is full of foxes and wolves and monsters and bad guys, and nature's law is that the wolf can eat the sheep and nature won't punish the wolf. Nature will allow the wolf to get stronger and healthier. Nature's law is brutal. Reality, as you might say it, Maya, as they used to say over in India, is harsh, is brutal, is ruthless. And it's very hard for you to escape that fact. And what we do as humans is try guard ourselves from the outside world, try guard ourselves from the truth, from reality. Literally, we try to protect ourselves from nature and reality because it kills us. And so we form civilizations. And civilizations have within them an internal logic that makes it nice to live inside of them. They're a safe space by default. By default, civilizations are premised on lies. This is known as the noble lie. They're premised on bullshit. They're premised on nonsense. Everybody is equal. Everything is fair. God rewards the nice people and punishes the evil predators like the wolves. All these things are the myths of society. And of course, the job of the Brahmin in some sense is to uphold those myths. The job of the Brahmin is in some sense to lie. Again, the noble lie. And this is a very difficult thing for people to kind of chew upon, because what you start to realize is that it's truth and the herd and the peasants and the mob and civilization. Truth and civilization they're almost opposites. They're polarized. Reality out there and civilization in here are not the same thing. And they're in a war against each other. And so if you wanted to bring the truth to reality, you'd have to red pill everyone. You'd have to run in and tell them how things are. You'd be like Nietzsche running around like hugging everybody's horse. And they're like, what are you doing, you freaky incel? Go back up your mountain. We've got enough Brahmins down here. Go feck off and write your stupid book no one's going to read. And this is the thing, is that someone to go in and create a myth about what is a real myth is hard. And in fact, the experience of reality in society is premised on the categories and the reality and the myth and the story and the noble lie that the Brahmins sell. And so when people come to you and talk to you about finding the truth or telling the truth and all this type of stuff, it's important stuff, of course. And there's obviously, don't want to get too intellectual about this, because there's obviously a naked, obvious truth to things that people are really incapable of accepting. And this goes beyond any of this feckin' nonsense I'm talking about here. But on some level, there's this great, great challenge, this great problem, where we go in and whoever is the Brahmin can in some sense decide what the myth of the civilization is. And that sort of becomes reality. And this gets particularly enhanced when civilizations are so profound as we are now. In some sense, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because civilization is now so technologically capable that we're now able to reshape nature. And all of a sudden, we're able to reshape reality. We're in a post-human, post-technological, post-industrial reality, and we could destroy the world if we wanted to. We could do anything, is what they say. And so, because of this whole idea of what reality is becomes a bit kind of feckin' confusing, because now there's no longer a nature out there to ground ourselves in. There's no longer a harsh evolutionary situation with its very firm restrictive laws that ground our thinking in. That we can, like, if someone just gets ahead of, if a civilization gets beyond itself, it gets punished. This is what happens in the Bible the whole time. A civilization gets highfalutin because it's successful, and then of course Yahweh says, fucking idiots, and sends in some barbarians to go in and destroy them as a punishment for losing touch with natural law, with God's law, with the laws of nature, with the brutal laws of violence. And this cycle has sort of just kept everybody in check for a long period of time. But now what you see happening is something fascinating, because we're now defeating nature itself. We're defeating reality itself and going into this position where we can sort of just define, like, people nowadays grow up and they never see nature. You'll talk to people, spoken to people in cities, and they're like, and I talk to them about coming from the country, and they're like, oh my God, you've seen cows? And it's like, I remember there's a girl who used to think that chocolate milk came from brown cows. And we've got people living inside of civilization perpetually and never experiencing reality at all. And you see this an awful lot. This explains an awful lot of our current situation. And so what happens is the category creators are almost like the masters of the world, the masters of reality. Their categories go very far nowadays, an awful lot further than before. There's nothing to check them like there was before. The categories we install inside of people, just there's no grounding to them. And so you have this great challenge where there's this war for the mind, but there's no way to ground it. Because if you come in and you try to represent nature and naturalistic philosophies like someone like Nietzsche does, you're very quickly seen as evil, because you're saying harsh truths to restrict people. This is what you see an awful lot with the transhuman movement. There's this idea that we want to break free from the imprisonment of our body, the imprisonment of biology. And if you come in and start saying stuff about biological realism, and start talking about biology, it's just almost like the secret myth of our age, the secret culture war of our age. If you try to talk about the true biological realism and realities that come from the body and the inequality built into the actual body, because biology is the study of life, of course, people don't like that. People get angry at that. That feels like an offense towards them. And they will castigate you. They will categorize you as a demon, as a devious wolf, as a misleader, as a misinformer. And they get mad at you. They get big mad at you. And of course, the priestly types guiding this whole ship will support those categories. And you have a nice coherent herd. And of course, this is the kind of key point, is that this herd, even though it's coherent, is not healthy. This is what Nietzsche would say, is that the priest is especially prone to this. This is the most poisonous form of the priest that people have to become savvy to if they really want to mature out of this, is that the priest's only way of controlling people is by keeping them sick. Because the blunt and harsh reality is that if you were strong and you were vital, if you were healthy, just like the kings and the warriors would naturally be, if your vital force and your morality and your outlook is aligned with the laws of life which empower you with vitality, because that's what nature does when you get on her side properly, when you properly serve her values and do the needy what she demands, she blesses you, she gives you vital power, she gives you health and energy and strength, and then you feel good. And all of a sudden you're beyond an obsessive categorical existence. You live a truly well-felt life experience, and you don't need any more of that crap. And you see beyond it, and a priest to you seems like a demon, seems like a fool, seems like an idiot, something that you're naturally averse to, that you don't take too serious. And this is always the tension between the warriors and the priests. Because, of course, the peasants, the undercaste, they are the failures of nature in many ways. They are the people who are not blessed maybe with intelligence or excessive genetic strength or even ancestral strength and stuff like this. The warriors are the specimens, the small 1% that are physically strong and physically capable and able to stand in that position of authority. But, of course, there's a great divide between them because they tend to oppress and annoy the peasants. And the peasants, there's more of them, so they might rebel. There's this problem. So the priests sort of try to represent the peasants, and then the warriors and the priests are all given out. This is why this rock, paper, scissors thing works. It's a very interesting system when you see it going. But the challenge then is that the priest's greatest source of power is the validation of the peasantry. And if the peasantry become too vital and strong, they start getting their own ideas. And so the instinct within the priest is to put categories upon them that make them sick. Nietzsche's critique of Christianity was precisely on these lines. This was the point of what he was saying. That instead of offering a ideology and religion that categorized or made people focus on things that actually brought health, a religion of focus on good eating habits, good physical training, instead Christianity comes in and it ignores all of those. It makes people ideological. It idealizes their reality and takes them out of doing the really down-to-earth important things. There's no discussion of diet in Christianity compared to, for example, in Buddhism. or in Hinduism. There's at least a discussion about it over there. The diet question is brought up. There's no discussion about physical training in Christianity. And that's something that was quite common in Greece, but this is wiped out. In fact, the Olympians were pushed out. The Olympics were deleted for 1,500 years after Christianity came into Europe, because such things as physical worship, idealizing of the body and the world, is evil, is demonic. And basically, a healthy body is categorized as wrong, as bad. And that's the priestly types swooping over the Europeans and categorizing their health as evil and twisting their minds to see these categories, these sheepish herd categories that Nietzsche would often talk about, as the things that they should worship. And Nietzsche would say what was happening there is the priests were seeping into Europe and poisoning the population so they could create a nervous system over them and control them. And a lot of people don't like Christianity nowadays. A lot of these priestly types nowadays, ironically, don't like Christianity, to say Christianity is some horrible thing, some nasty thing that was trying to keep you ignorant and dull and stupid. Oh, what an interesting statement. But of course, it's not like these people don't share the same bad instincts, because these things, they're like archetypes. They can show up in many different dresses. Nowadays, you can try keep people sick. You can have the same priestly instincts to herd the people the way you want them. And then when people try to break out of this stuff and become healthy, you can have magic jargon that you beat them back into shape with, and you can take everything from them. What does the priest do? How does the priest maintain control? He can't hurt you. Maybe he can stir people often up to execute you, but before that, there's other steps. Social ostracization. He refuses to allow you to have a wife and get married, so you have to commit adultery, and then he can burn you. He refuses to allow you to do business. He boots you out of society. He poisons society against you. And so if you try to represent health and strength, the priest makes everyone turn from you, and you're ostracized. And then what happens is there's a purification, like a whiskey distillation of sickness and decrepitness and poison. The least healthy and most compliant go underneath the control of the priest, and this symbiotic, horrid, parasitical relationship continues to form. And you see this stuff happening now. This is the ultimate red pill, because it's a very difficult challenge. How do you break free from that? How do you introduce the people to reality when people are naturally averse to reality? Because reality sucks. Reality is nasty. Reality is suffering. Reality is inequality and brutality. And of course, you can be a priestly type and sell them some bullshit that they like to hear, and you'll do quite well for yourself. Or you can try to tell them the naked, hard truth, and they won't like that. And they'll ostracize you, and they'll kick you off the platform, kick you out of the village, and bring down the force of super concepts upon you. And what would it mean to break free from this? What would it mean to mature and go a step beyond this? This is the very challenging Nietzschean question. It's the postmodern question. How do you bring actual truth back into the realm of super concepts? How does this happen? Now, he would say you need a philosopher of the future. Where would you find one of those? You need a philosopher of the future who is able to actually act like a Brahmin caste with good instincts. That would be very useful, wouldn't it? But until then, you're going to be in a shit show. And some examples of shit shows that have happened. George Orwell talks about this, inspired by communism. Very famously, George Orwell runs through this idea in 1984. I know it's quite cliche, but it's very true to look over this stuff. He runs through all this stuff, and what is he talking about there consistently over and over again? What is he discussing? He's discussing Winston's job in 1984 is to literally fake language, to reform reality, to rewrite history. He's a part of the Brahmin caste. He's the administration wing of the Brahmin caste. And he sits down, and there's all these manipulations of language that go on. There's doublespeak. Language is getting compressed into the short funnel that the party can use in order to keep the herd coherent, to master the herd. There's a dumbing down and a reduction of people. And this is a horrid direction. This is the priestly instinct reigned in the most terrible place possible, keeping people dumb, stupid, and operant worker bees within these super societies. This is what the whole idea of Orwell was talking about, the mastery of language turning into a mind-fucking of the people. And the challenge and the difficulty about how can you see modern technological society allowing us to break free from this. Ultimately, when you are in power, when you're the priestly type and you've got technology underneath you, you can do the job of language manipulation and mind control at an incredible scale. Incredible scale. The printing press allowed you to do it. The church is one first early institution, like a big nervous system. Then comes the printing press, even more powerful. And then the next one is, you've got media, radio, and then you've got the internet. And as these things grow, they offer more opportunity for freedom, but they also at the same time offer more opportunity for control. And this is the double-edged sword of everything. And so, in conclusion, what's going on with Joe Rogan is you're seeing a very interesting clash of these two titanic forces. Joe is the sort of natural, biologically vital, chimp-like, grug warrior caste man who's running around, literally doesn't really get any of this stuff, which is fine. He's not like a bad dude at all. I'm not trying to make fun of his intelligence or something. He's a very smart dude, actually, but he's not like a dork like me reading Nietzsche the whole time. But he's going around, he's checking all this stuff out, and he just is asking, he's stumbling his way forward, and he's obviously a bit sensitive. He knows, we all kind of know these tripwires by the priests, by the way, we're well aware of them. But he kind of trips off a couple of them, because he's like, well, free speech, may as well go for it. And then all of a sudden the forces of darkness swoop down, the Jargonites swoop out of the corner, swoop down upon him and try to strike him off the very face of the internet. But the thing is that because of the internet, because of this strange irony of life, he's gained so much power that he's in some sense more powerful than them. And he finds himself in a very crazy position, because he's not a priestly type, and he doesn't want to be. And he's humble, and this is, it's one of those, it's like the Cincinnati problem in Rome. Like, he's humble where he doesn't really want that responsibility, but he finds himself shoved into center stage as a consequence. But what's really going on is that he's tripwiring the sacred myths, the sacred cows that keep society together for these Brahmins. And he's triggering a power instinct. And he's going to get an awful lot of pushback. But this power instinct, the more that they trigger it, the more they lose legitimacy. The more people become aware of this stuff. And the more opportunities begin to arrive, and creative people begin to think differently about this. And the intelligent, because this is ultimately what it is, the intelligent people who sit in the Brahmin caste, a lot of them are sort of neutral, and they're not able to critique their own values. This is what Nietzsche would often say. They're not able to see how much they're intoxicated by this poison. But as this stuff begins to happen, they'll begin to snap out of it. A lot of them are. I'm one of them. I didn't always think this way, but I've been mind-washed by a German incel. And a lot of people are starting to shift now. A lot of people are starting to see the game. And this is ultimately good, because it brings a maturity to the situation. It brings a realism to the situation. People are now able to think clearly about these postmodern problems, these challenges of how people do, like dark magicians try to seize language for themselves and wield it as a weapon to cause punishment upon others. Now, you may have seen a hint at the solution to this. Of course, a quality individual, someone with vital strength, someone with capacity, someone with mental skill. These people are the most difficult for idiot loser Brahmins to keep sick. And this is what I find so fascinating about this stuff, is that through the art of sickness, through the art of delusion, of misleading, maybe if we want to use that term, through the art of keeping people stupid, uneducated, the old priestly instinct, take the magic book, tell people that reality lives inside this magic book, and you can't read it, only I can read it, and I will tell you what it means. And you have to show up and just keep doing the things that I tell you to do. And none of these things are going to involve education, literacy, none of these things are going to involve mastering yourself, none of these things are going to involve health, vitality, strength. All of these things will be sidelined, and all the things I want you to do will be controlled by my concepts. This is the instinct within the priest that is very, very dangerous, and something that you have to be acutely aware of. And as I said, it's archetypal. It shows up nowadays just as much as anything else. It shows up nowadays with the Maslow's hierarchy of cope, where you have what is the priestly offer for health nowadays: SSRIs, cope, book cope, rationalizations, eating bugs and seed oils and like fake milk and stuff like this. And this is what's sold to you as salvation. And of course this leads to things like autoimmune diseases and lack of health, and leads you in a state of suffering. And then this suffering builds up inside you, and you form resentment towards life. And this resentment towards life is being caused by the priests. But of course the priests give you some bullshit story that the reason why you suffer is because there's evil warriors like Joe Rogan out there that are putting you through pain. And so they can monopolize the pain that they create inside you. They can actually monopolize that and use it as a power that they gather together and force multiply and send it directions. These bastards are like little parasites that are summoning up demons. They're hurting people. They're poisoning people, creating pain and inflammation inside of them, and then summoning all that power as one and shooting it in these directions. They're like Voldemorts, these little dastardly monsters. They're like Voldemorts. You've got to watch for them. And of course the antidote to this, the thing that you can do in order to become antagonist to the priestly type is to become a competent individual across every realm possible, across the ability to, most importantly, speak and articulate yourself and be a master of concepts and language and understand how to use the brain and actually how to use your head to speak, so you can speak up and speak out, but also see clearly and think clearly, to become an individual who's anti-fragile intellectually. This is, of course, what old liberal arts traditional university was designed to do. It was designed to improve the quality of every individual who walked through it, to make them a absolute beast, an absolute Chad, an absolute top guy that could stand against all this stuff. But of course that has completely gone. Now what are the universities turned into? But like absolute palaces of cope. Even before that, the education system was so profound in Greece, where they would train people in gymnastics, in health, in physical excellence, in music. There was a whole array of ways that you were perfected as an individual, because that's what it takes in order to develop yourself to the ultimate capacity. In order for you to reach high quality, to be anti-fragile, to be strong, to be healthy, you need to do all of these things. It's a sort of cyclical situation. Everything needs to be hit. It's a systems process towards the individual. And this is what interests me. Now, my big thing that I'm doing, the program that I run, is about training people specifically how to speak, to get that capacity to its highest level possible, because this is the thing that changed my life. Ultimately, I actually dropped out of college and learned how to do this stuff, and I've become quite successful because of it. Now, alongside of that, we want to keep that pressure to be vital and strong and everything as well, but I think the most impactful and straightforward and force multiplying thing is to learn that ability to think clearly and then turn that into correct speech, which you can then apply to the incredible tools you have here on the internet in order to change your life and actually take yourself to a new level, to take yourself out of this situation of victimhood that the priests have left you in, where you're inflamed and struggling and maybe financially restricted, creatively restricted, stuck in some fucking job that you don't like or something like that, stuck in some professional hell doing some corporate job or whatever crap. So if you want to go on that path of actually transforming yourself as an individual and developing your capacity to the highest level, you can come on board my program and actually see what I've got in order to get that done. The processes and procedures that I went through myself, the rite of passage that I went through to make myself capable and good at speaking, good at articulating myself, vital in mind and therefore vital in body, so I could set myself free. Now, so I could set myself to become an avenger against the Brahmins. To become a rival Brahmin, maybe. That's what it is. Now, if you're interested in this, if you'd like to hear more about this program, there's a video over my website that explains it more. You can go down into the link in the description. It'll take you over there. Over there, you can apply for a call if you're interested. You sit down and chat to one of my boyos, and they'll explain to you how it all works. They'll explain to you the ins and outs, the specifics, because obviously I'm ranting here, so I won't be able to talk about it too much at length. But if you're interested in that, pop down the link below, check it out, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you very much for your time. Stay juicy. Bye-bye.